My name is Wen Lee Lim, host of this podcast and the Chief Impact Officer at Flourish DX. The purpose of this podcast is to be a platform for thought leadership, conversations, and practical guidance from subject matter experts, service providers, innovative tech platforms, and employers in the region. We, as a community in Asia, have a shared responsibility, not just as individuals, but as employers, colleagues, and just friends, and the broader community to help create mentally healthy workplaces so we can prevent suffering and promote human flourishing. So today, I actually have a neighborhood friend with me, Chef Chris Kong. Welcome to the show.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
And so why I say he's a neighborhood friend is because he has this amazing granola shop just literally like 5 minutes down the road, and I got to go got to know you literally because I went to the granola shop. But you have a very super interesting story and like just your background. So can I just ask you, let's just go straight into it because I have so many questions. But yeah, kind of like, how did you get on this road to chefing?
Yeah, so for me, I'm from the US. I'm from Seattle, born in California, grew up in Seattle. And actually, my parents opened an Italian restaurant in Seattle in 1993. So I grew up in the restaurant business at a very young age. So I'd seen it firsthand with my parents and then myself being involved in it through high school and middle school and college. And it kind of just like, I got the bug like in high school when we actually had like high school culinary competition. Like there was a culinary team at my school. It was like a home ec team, but then like you went and competed, and it was like in its early infancy stages, and it was to represent state. So my high school, we kind of like, they knew my parents had a restaurant, but I never thought about cooking or being part of the restaurant as like or the F&B scene as like a feasible career path. I was like, I'm gonna be a basketball player, right? But obviously after, high school, you're not gonna grow anymore. And that dream went out the window. So I was like, sure, I'll join the team and do some, cooking, because obviously we're naturally familiar with being in a kitchen and handling a knife. So that kind of started, the first first initiation into this world of F&B and hospitality. So we actually competed 3 years in high school. Our team won state, and then we represented our state. And then we were able to travel across the U.S. and kind of meet other people in F&B, and also culinary schools at the time. They were giving out scholarships for people to come if you would win. And that was a huge thing. I got to meet like teachers, professors, chefs, and things like that. And I saw that there was more to F&B than just like my parents' little Italian restaurant in Seattle. There was a wide range of things that you could do with F&B, not just in the kitchen. You had the front of the house, you had the back end stuff, you had ops, and different aspects of it. So that's how it kind of started. And then from then on, I was like, okay, this is a career path. I think like I should definitely explore more. I feel like I'm very good at it, and we'll just dive head in, go straight for it. So after high school and a few of those competitions, I was like, okay, I want to travel. I don't want to stay in Seattle. I feel like there's so much more to see out there and experience. And then also had talking to the culinary teachers. They were like, you should definitely get more experience and try to learn from the best. So that's when I bought a one-way ticket after I graduated college, and then went straight to Malaysia, where my dad's from. So my parents are from. Yeah.
So, I mean, on the Malaysia stuff, like why Malaysia? You could have like worked in Paris, I don't know, all of these fancy places around the world, but you literally went to like a zhizha store, right? I mean, for the listeners who don't know what zhizha is basically, I don't know, Malaysians, we just call it dinner. But over here they call it zhizha, which is dishes with rice. But yeah, tell us about that part, because I actually Googled you and read about it, and it's super interesting. But why? Why Malaysia?
So the reason I chose like Southeast Asia and Malaysia was because I didn't know a lot about Asian cooking or Asian cuisine. Like I grew up in the US, we had like Americanized Chinese food. We had like my grandmother's and mother's iterations of it. And we didn't visit Asia, and I spent some time like going to school over the summers, but we never like really immersed ourselves in the culture. And we had no family in the US. It was only my immediate family. Everybody else was in either Thailand, Malaysia, or Taiwan. So I never really got to connect with that side. So it was important to me to kind of just like reconnect with that side as well. So that's why I went for Malaysia, and I really wanted to learn about Asian food and like my culture and where my parents grew up and things like that. So that's why that was the first place we went to. And I was looking for a while to like try to find a job, and it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. Just because like obviously work permits and things like that and visas are always a bit of an issue and a difficult. And I just want to work, and they don't understand like you're from the US. Why would you want to come here like to work?
Yeah.
You have
They'll be
this blue
like,
pass.
why are you? Everyone's trying to get across to the other side, I
Yeah,
think.
they're like, you have this blue passport. Why would you want to like come over here? But for me, I just wanted to learn. And at that time, when you're young in your career as a chef, you want to absorb as much as you can. And it's basically like a sponge. So you go and you just keep your head down and you just work. So we were trying to find a place for a while, but we didn't know. But then I ended up in this place because one of my dad's cousins, she's a regular at one of these restaurants in Malaysia. It's in Damansara. It's called Lala Chong, and they do seafood, like a lot of seafood. And it's a huge open air, and they have an AC room. And this place would always be busy, and they like turn it like 3 times. And I'm talking about like 100, maybe 200 covers, every day, and that's like a lot. And you're in this kitchen that's outdoor, it's hot, there's no AC. And it was my first time in like an Asian setup kitchen, because I'd just done like European style with like the stove tops and the pots and the pans. And here you're with wok, steamer, fry station, and you have one guy that just preps everything and hands it to the chef. The chef doesn't even like, he looks at it, he knows what it's going to be, but he doesn't measure anything. And then there's different stations for the wok. Like you have the head guy who only does the most expensive things, and like shark fin soup and like all these extravagant things that nobody else can touch. And you have like the middle one who just does like the stir fry vegetables. And yeah, it was a great experience, and I really got to immerse myself in that culture with the people too. And for me, I always told them like, okay, you just pay me whatever you can, just give me a place to live and like 3 meals a day. And they were like, okay, this is weird, but like, okay. So my brother and I actually stayed. Well, I stayed longer. My brother left after a month, but I stayed for almost about 3 months there. And
Wow.
I lived like, as if I were a foreign worker coming in to work at a restaurant. And that's where I actually got to build this human connection as well, and kind of see that every part of the world has their kind of like blue collar work that will kind of take another country to come and help them to kind of like the very laborious or intensive work that maybe not necessarily the people in the country want to do per se. So like in the US, you'd have um, the Mexicans or the Puerto Ricans that would come and kind of do like the lower end jobs. And that was a big thing, and I've always grew up seeing that and working with them. But then coming here to Asia, it would be either the Nepalese or the Bangladeshis that would come, and they would be here for like 2 years at a time, and they would just work and send their money back to their families. And this was the thing that I connected with a lot of them, because I'd be growing and working with them every day, but also just to be able to live with them and learn about their culture as well, and getting that firsthand experience. And for me, I never looked at it was like, oh, it's not good or whatever. Like I enjoyed it. Like I learned a bit of Nepalese. I would go with them on their off day. We eat Nepalese food, and it was just really fun. I had like 7 Nepalese brothers, because they were all there at the same time, and they all worked at the front. And we all lived in like this little dormitory that was in the back that was really kind of like run down. It was like one bathroom on each floor that was like open air. You had like a bucket with like water that you take a shower with. You kind of like put your clothes, like dirty clothes, into like the towel, and you like squish around the soap and hang dry it like on the back. And yeah, and there's like 3 people in a room. You kind of like put the mattress down and you stay, and then like you put it back up so you can have room during the day. Like one little TV, and you're like sharing it
Yes.
with everybody.
I'm like thinking right now that you probably could make a movie from this, because it's so vivid. Like, the experiences that you've had. Basically, I mean, like you're talking about the coming from the States into Asia, where no one really wants these jobs, to be honest. The locals don't want it. And here you are coming in. And then basically, then the next step to your career, it's like you're out in New York, working in like the best restaurants. I actually think you should make a movie about it. But I'm just gonna bring it to like just the workplaces that you've observed, and just like kitchens in general. So you've worked in like, high-end Michelin star kitchens, and then your Sizzha places, and now you have your own place making granola. Um, Kitchens and just the work environments in restaurants are known to be pretty stressful. People say, whether it's the heat in the kitchen, and you're really really running a very high temperature, like hot. Just even like customers, they could be rude sometimes. Like just all combination of all these things, plus chefs I think they're just under a lot of stress, and trying to manage everything, pump up the food on time. We know the bad examples, but maybe can you talk about one really great place that you work that you saw that, what, they're really supporting people and their mental health and just their physical health, and a very conducive environment for flourishing? Because we can dig up lots of negative ones, but I kind of just want to dive into the positive.
Yeah, for sure. For me personally, there are two places that I worked at that I absolutely love the way things are run. The last place I worked for was the Nomad in New York with Daniel Hume and Will Guidara, who are, I guess, one of the pioneers besides Danny Meyer to kind of have this way of leading people and leading by example, and giving them tools that they need to succeed, not just in their field, but beyond, which I think was a huge thing. And that was a huge eye opener for me. I mean, I kind of grew up at the time where, like, the Gordon Ramsays, like you were yelling and like screaming, and obviously there were those kind of kitchens. But I also think there was a new school of thought as well too, that people were coming around to, that was like, you can't do that to people anymore. Nobody wants to work in those environments or kind of be in those environments. It's not healthy. So for me, New York was a great one. It's kind of where I first took like a huge role as a sous chef position, which is kind of like, third or second in command, usually depending how big the kitchen is. So in that kitchen, we were in charge about like 60 cooks. You do probably about like 200 covers a night. So then you have to really learn and communicate. And it's not just about the skill. Like, the skill is one thing, but also being able to communicate and get across what you need to get done in a small amount of window, time, pressure, obviously, but then also to be able to lead this team that's relying on you. And I think from working there, they had management meetings every week, which we would talk about and discuss what we need to do for the week, which is a great thing. What I hadn't been part of before, I don't think, which they also had leadership training just for management, that you would go and they have like guest speakers that come in and talk to you about that, not in the food industry, but also in other parts of the other industries as well that had leadership roles, like CEOs and things like that. So you get a firsthand experience, and you're really like absorbing all these things that are going to make you a better leader and better communicator. And for me, that was like how I wanted to build my culture and eventually like have my place. So working at the Nomad and at Guy Savoy was the other one, was like there was a level of professionalism that everybody took, and they understood that, and there was a level of respect. But then also there was a level of communication that, like, there was not just like one person says all and be all. There was a conversation, and everybody's input was important. So I think,
so those two examples would be the best that you've seen. And I spoke to you about how kind of you run DearBorn, and I can see that, you're probably trying to take all the great learnings and then putting it into your business now.
Yeah. And it's a constant progress to try to get better, and you're always learning, and there's never just one way. We're always learning things new, and then having conversations with the team and kind of really building that relationship, I think is important for the mental health part. And it's not just like you're coming in to work and you're doing the task, but it's more of like, we actually know about the people, and I want to care about like what they're doing in their lives as well too. So I think that's a big thing.
So you said just before, you just said, there was a new school of people basically running kitchens and restaurants in a way that, it's not taking on the old, that you can just abuse people, yell at them, and create this quite toxic environment. Where do you think all of that came from originally? Like that kind of culture, do you think it was just like, just previous generations and that's just how it was? Or were there certain triggers that people weren't able to deal with, and then they kind of took it out on other people? Like, what do you think the underlying triggers for like toxic environments in kitchens come from?
I mean, as we know, the F&B and hospitality, it's really stressful environment. You're under constant pressure. So I think a lot of times it comes from the frustration, and you're reacting rather than gathering your thoughts and then thinking about it and how the effects of it or the consequences that it will have. And I think we tend to be quite reactive in the moment. And I think that's not a good way, because sometimes the way you react is not what you really intend to mean, but it can lead to something negative sometimes. And it's really tiring mentally and exhausting physically. So you're working long hours and you're striving to be as perfect as you can and execute these things at such a high level. And this is just saying from the top tier restaurants, obviously. And it can have a toll on like your decision making, from like even the littlest things that, you know, may not be a big issue will become a big issue, and it might actually cause this bigger can of worms that open up, you know. And I think those little things can, you know, definitely trigger the negative practices or like this negative attitude. But also, even at that top level, people are paying a lot more money. So people themselves are also expecting the best from all aspects, not just like the food, but also from like the experience of the restaurant, from the front of the house, from the moment you walked in, or people have this preconceived notion of it too. And when it doesn't hit that, you know, there's also added pressure on the team. You know, if you get like a bad review or like somebody said something negative, and that can always lead to, you know, these little bursts of outputs of things that can be negative in the long term, you know. But yeah.
So reactive, I think what I pick up is like, you know, it's very reactive. Like all these kind of responses and all that. And then when you were talking about your top tier kind of end of town as well, I read somewhere that Beyonce is probably one of your most famous customers. Are you allowed to talk about that?
Not on the
Oh,
record, but she had her 40th, I think, no, 40th, I can't remember. She had her birthday party at the Nomad on the top, and that was a big thing that everybody was a part of. I can't say it was me personally. It was a team.
Were you stressed?
I don't think so, because in New York, you get a lot of people that come in that are quite famous, and it becomes this norm. And they're not, then people don't come up to them and like take photos, or like, I don't know how it is like in other places, but in New York, you could be walking down the street and you'll see somebody famous, and you just be like, hey, what's up? And like, that's it. And people go about their business. And then in restaurants, they kind of want to have like the time away from themselves and like have the exclusivity. So you have certain ways to handle VIP guests, as you would say, because they do not want to be disturbed and they want to have their own party as well, and, you know, live like a normal person. But yeah, the team there did a great job, and, you know, I can't say too much, but it was definitely
no
for me. It was great, but I think other people who read that are like, that's even a bigger highlight for them. Like my wife is like, what? You didn't, you know, I'm like, I'm okay, you know, like.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. People are people. And so I think that's really great that I think a lot of people, you know, that kind of at that kind of fame, they just want to be treated normally. Yeah. So anyway, I just thought I had to add that in because I was like, I read it before this interview. I was like, I'm just Googling you. I'm like, oh wow.
Oh, they really did their homework there. They really had that one.
Anyway, so let's talk about burnout. I mean, and just the working hours. Most people in the restaurant industry, and even, you know, people I know, it's really, really long hours, and just the toll that it takes on you. And because you're working weekends, and actually, a lot of the times you can't, you don't really have off weekends, or, you know, and just be able to unwind and all that. And so like, how have you kind of managed, I'm sure, going through, you know, all that training and working, you know, in the kitchen from the start of your career to where you got to, how did you manage it yourself, or saw good examples of people managing themselves to prevent burnout?
So for me, personally, like how I would kind of handle the stress and the day-to-day demands is now, like, even at our shop here specifically, what we've done, I want people to have like a fulfilling life outside of work. And obviously it's crazy, right, that you don't have that in this kind of industry. But it's very basic, and it's hard to achieve sometimes, because the demands of what you need to do and the hours that we work are not normally your 9 to 5. But I think it's like a complex issue that's hard to fix per se, because a lot of time people have to think of the cost of the food, the cost of the ingredients, and they have to put like a dollar value on the time that someone took to prepare that food. And for me, that dollar value on that skill and the experience, and how companies and businesses have the ability to create less physical demanding schedules, which I think is important. So for us, we have like a 5-day work schedule. Nobody works more than 5 days, so you have 2 days off. So then we want to prioritize our staff as well. So for me, if people perceive like the value of the people that are working for the company and how people are basically perceiving the skilled labor that they're skilled labor of how like the value, so basically if you prioritize the people and the people making the product for yourself, you're going to put more value on that. And I think that's important because a lot of times people forget about the human element of it. And it's important to have that, to realize that like, your $5 chicken plate of rice that uncle is saying at 4 a.m. in the morning and spending 12 hours making it, like it's $5. And for him to like prioritize like his mental health, and that it may not be his first thing that he's like thinking about. He's just trying to burn and turn and make sure like, okay, I need to work, which is tough. And I think like in our industry, we need to like be able to recognize that, like, okay, how can we help him also to kind of like let him, relax or kind of prioritize himself rather than trying to keep this hamster wheel that keeps on turning, just for him to survive. And for me, I come from an extremely like a privileged place where we can do that in our business. We're able to kind of allow our teams to have the 5 days work week, to have the 8-hour shift, to be able to afford to pay 1 hour for lunch paid, and to be able to kind of like separate, the work and personal, or allowed to give the space so the team itself can also enjoy the time and appreciate those things. Because I think a lot of times you kind of forget about that, and you're just going because you need to survive. You need to like, how am I going to pay the next bill? How are we going to do this? And how it's this thing that kind of adds up into constant pressure. So you can always just be like thinking about that rather than like having time for yourself or having the time to like take a step back and just enjoying it. So I think in that sense, it's very tough. And I think a lot of things have to not change, but have to get better, I think.
I think with the changes as well as this incremental, I think it is always hard to make like a huge shift, right? Like, just from where the ideal state is and where things are at now. But like, it's just the little things, like even you just said, like a paid lunch hour. All these things that actually a lot of other industries, I mean, including mine, where we're office workers, take for granted. But in other industries, like if that could just make a huge difference, even though it seems like a norm. But it's not a norm actually for a lot of the F&B. And I love that you're integrating kind of these practices into your granola place. So I know we forgot actually to talk about your granola place. So it's called DearBorn. It's in Everton Park for those of you who are in Singapore, or when you visit, please go and visit him. But it's probably the tastiest granola I've had. And this all came from a pivot during the pandemic where you couldn't run your private kitchen anymore, your home dining, and then you went and created it. But I think why I also wanted you to come on the show was that when I spoke to you just about how you were running your business, I was like, this is actually probably one of the most thoughtful conversations I've had with someone who is in the space and really thinking about everything from people, planet, the environment, like all of these things that you really care about, and you have the ability, and also, I mean, in a way, a luxury to be able to control and create what you want to create, which is super cool. So yeah, like I just thought, if we can just share these kind of little things that even you're doing in your work or you've seen in your work, that we might be able to encourage other people in the industry, or even just as customers, to really think about what we are, who are we supporting, the people behind it, but also just that if we have a bad day, don't take it out on the staff in the restaurant. Don't take it on the poor hawker auntie and uncle that we come across, because it kind of snowballs right back into the kitchen, So that's kind of where, like, I mean, just the context of why I just thought it's an industry that we all interface with. If you think about it, we all go out to eat, but we don't really know the stories. I mean, we see it in reality TV shows and all that. And in a way, it's kind of celebrated about how mean people can be, right? Which is so crazy. What are your thoughts about that?
I think back in the day, maybe it used to be like this badge of honor if you kind of made it through like this gritty, tough restaurant with like these stars and crazy chefs. And, like if you survive that, like you can do anything. And I think nowadays it's not necessarily that anymore. It's not necessarily a badge of honor like you would back in the day, where if you work for that person, you were definitely going to be able to get the next job and be at this next place and be able to do like great things. But I think now, like, you can work for great places that don't necessarily have this like toxic environment or these negative things that, you know, can affect you not only at work but also outside of work. Which, you know, when we talk about mental health, I think it's a huge thing for me to like get to know the team and understand them and like have a life outside of like, what are your hobbies, what are your interests, like what can we do as a human being to be a better individual. Because I think if you have that part in a good spot and you're able to recognize that, it can translate even more to like when you work, like people are more receptive to give you feedback and like have this conversation. Like with my team, I'm like, okay, what flavors can we do? Just write down whatever flavors you want to do. We can work on it. It doesn't matter. Whatever the food cost is, you throw out whatever flavor, we'll buy it, we'll try it. If it doesn't work, okay, we'll bin it. But then if not, we get to try again. And I think a lot of the times people are like shocked, like, I'm just like, you know, this kid, like, why are you, you know, like take my advice or why you want me to try? I'm like, you have to grow and you have to like lead people and show them by example. And I want people to understand. I think for me in this F&B industry, in the hospitality, I know that there had been a lot of like toxicity and negative places that people kind of like see. And maybe I think in Asia sometimes, not to generalize, but I think compared to the West, there is this kind of old school mentality of, you know, that it's not seen as like a real career or like a good job to be in like hospitality, or it's like you didn't do well in school or something. So you're kind of doing this. And I don't think that's the case. And I wanted to be able to show like people in F&B and like in hospitality, you can succeed and it can be successful, you know, and it's not just, you know, you couldn't achieve it at school or whatever, and you couldn't be a doctor or a lawyer, you know. And I think it's important to kind of like show the younger generation, tell them that like, yeah, if you want to be creative and you want to do something that's, you know, it can be well, you can excel at it as well, and you can find success. And I think for me, that's a big thing. It's more about nurturing and kind of leading the team now. It's like, I've got all this experience, but how can I share it with them? And I hope like for the people who work here, that they'll be able to grow and like have that attitude to wherever place they work next, or kind of like set the bar up for them to be like, okay, this is like the standard that we want to be, that it can be this way. It doesn't have to be like this. Maybe this is the norm, but you know, we can be better. And how do we get better? And knowing that like we have these tools, we have to be better, you know?
Yeah.
And I think just being able to kind of like show that to them and kind of like for them, it's like, oh wow, I didn't know, like, you know, so that's a big thing for me. Especially.
I think, yeah, I mean, you're talking here about like kind of just job progression and training and support for people to get to the next level, rather than it being seen as a dead end job.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is like, you know, what you've said, it is across Asia that, you know, people don't really aspire to become a chef or work in the industry. It's kind of like an in-between thing, or yeah, that you didn't study hard enough, or you know, you couldn't make it academically, which is not true, because yeah, like, I mean, it's a different skill set and just the skills are not recognized as much. So I love that you're really empowering people, but also giving them the belief that, you know, you actually have a unique skill and talent. And not everyone can cook. Yeah. And not everyone can do that. Yeah.
But I think like a big thing I wish I would have taken more on is like in college to take a psych class, like a psych 101 class. Because I think a lot of it, like running your own business, having an F&B space, or just a business in general, it has to do with a lot of communication, different personalities. And these are skills that are important, that, you know, we need to be able to like talk to people and like communicate with them effectively, because every person is different. Everybody has their own thing going on. And you have to be able to be empathetic towards that and understand like each person's kind of where they're coming from or where they are in this stage of life. And I think once you understand that and have that human connection, it's like this bond that, you know, it's more important, and you're able to grow with this person or like get the best from the individual, you know, rather than like just like telling him what to do and not having this conversation or reciprocating from both of you guys. And it's just kind of one way instead of like being like an open, you know, communication. It's like a one-way street instead of like a, you know, highway with all these intersections, you know, which I think
Yeah, top
Yeah.
down. Yeah. Well, and I mean, in the long term as well, I mean, you should be able to retain staff a lot longer. That, people who enjoy coming to work and feel like they're being heard and being valued. You're just going to get better productivity. And so I'm actually, you know what? I'm thinking, oh, what flavors are going to come out? That's in the back of my mind right now. so um so I'm going to just land on this question and just kind of like just think about, I know we've spoken a lot about connection, and valuing people and all that, but just for the overall industry, if we just kind of stand back, what are your hopes for the F&B industry and kind of workplace mental health? Yeah, far away, maybe just one or two things.
Yeah. My hope is that everyone has a fulfilling life outside of work. Work is one part of your life, but I also think it's important to have like hobbies and to have businesses that prioritize people as well too, and not just think of it as like a monetary thing. And for me, it's the human aspect of it. I think, which I think if we can fulfill that part for people outside of work as well while you're in work, I think that is the ultimate like balance in life. I think if you're doing well outside, and then also it will reciprocate, or it'll be reflect in your work as well. You'll be more happy, you'll be more receptive to things. And it's just like, for me, I always try to think the best of people, and I think it's much harder to be negative and have these bad thoughts, and think that somebody is going to do this or somebody's not going to show. So I always think the best of people first. And I think when you go into that as like a business, and kind of viewing, well, my life, it makes things a bit more, not easier, but more balanced, I would say. But yeah, just being able to fulfill a life outside of work where you can have hobbies, that are interesting. Not only just like, yeah, I cook or I make granola, but I also like do pottery or ceramics, or like I do like Chinese yo-yo or something on the side. And that's crazy. I'm like, oh wow, you can do that. Like we have a couple of examples of the girls and the guys that work here, and they game a lot, and they're teaching me about Twitch and like all these things that I have no idea about, like streaming. You can make money streaming, and people, they love doing that, and that's what they enjoy doing. And it's great fun because we talk about it and learn about things, also like new
Yeah.
music. Like some of these kids are like 15 years younger than me, so they don't know who NSYNC is or the Backstreet Boys. So
Sorry.
yeah, so it's
Who doesn't know who the Backstreet Boys are? No, I'm joking.
well, I mean, that's what I thought too, right? So it's constant learning and constant like kind of getting to know people, having this conversation, really just kind of like seeing, okay, yeah, this is one part of your life, but there's also another part of your life too, and that should also kind of work simultaneously together, or it should work in harmony together as much as it can. It shouldn't be something that conflicts with you or makes you feel unhappy, or it should somehow work together, and then find that balance. And we always talk about that, and people always try to say it's about balance, but it's not always so easy. And I think if we connect with the human element of it, I think it makes it a bit more easy for everybody, just so we can know each other's background, and know where we come from, or a little bit more about it. Just for me, that's why I always like dive into different cultures and try to talk to people, just try to get to know them and where they come from, because everybody has their own story and has their own journey. But I think if you can kind of like understand that and acknowledge that too, and recognize that, it helps you like understand where they're coming from, but also communicate and also get the best from everybody, because everybody wants the best ultimately. Nobody wants to do a bad job. Everybody likes to do well, and like, and progress.
Yeah.
So
I think giving the benefit of the doubt, I mean, that's kind of a big thing, where you expect, like you said, you kind of expect the best from people, rather than, expecting people to stuff up or fail you. And then being really holistic about a person. And I love that. Yeah, you get to know. I know you were telling me, even the workers that are around the block and all that, you've gotten to know them, which is really cool. So talking about hobbies, what is your hobby? We're just going to end off in terms of how do you, running this business, and I'm sure it's not easy, like just starting up the shop, doing purely just granola, creating a real niche for yourself in the market. So how do you, in light of all of the demands of work, what do you do to kind of keep your mental health strong and healthy?
I mean, to be completely honest, like working the granola factory from working from the high pressure restaurants, it's definitely night and day. I definitely have a lot more flexibility and time to have time for myself and my family and my wife and the team. So for me, I really like taking the trains in the morning. I've always taken trains to work wherever I've worked in, especially in New York and even in Singapore. And to have that, like, 30 minutes, 40 minutes to get to work is kind of like this mental preparation for me to like know how to get ready for the day. I kind of have a list of like these things I need to do, but it's also a time for me to like listen to podcasts and to like listen to music and kind of just get myself mentally ready. I feel like when I don't have that like train ride or that public transport ride to get to work, I'm kind of like rushing from like a cab or to there. I kind of don't have that, which I really like taking public transport and having that time to myself where nobody is talking to me. I'm just sitting there and like I can read a book, and for me that's a big thing. Another thing is like I really love to like work out. So when I'm like doing my workouts, whether it's in the gym with calisthenics or like we're doing yoga or like I play basketball every Sundays with these like older, well, I say older, they're a little bit older than me, like 40-year-old, like 35-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So like we play basketball every Sunday at 7:30 in the morning. And that's what I look forward to because I played basketball in high school and like college we played. So I like playing basketball a lot. And so I play with these like older guys who we're not super aggressive, but we're still competitive and we don't get hurt. But it's like, I have that to look forward to every Sunday. And that's kind of just like my time to be able to do that. But then also to kind of recognize like to separate work and home. When I'm at home, we try not to talk about work. We just like, okay, after 5 p.m., I'm not going to answer my emails. At least it's something very urgent, but also for the team to kind of respect their time too. So like, I don't message them after a certain time, or like if it's an hour, like we're not gonna email. That's it. Like we just what we need to do by like 5 p.m. Once it's done, like that's it. I'm not gonna intrude on your personal time because that's your time and it's my time. And I think that's important to recognize and have those like kind of boundaries. But another thing that also like I've been doing lately and kind of like for me mentally is I like to tidy up a lot of things. So I like the house to be quite tidy. And when I have like I come home to like a tidy home, it makes me feel at ease. I don't know, it's kind of weird, but like if the house is like, yeah, like the room, if I do my bed and I come back and the bed's like made, I'm like, sick. Okay, I have this. I'm ready.
It's a lot of great disciplines, actually. Like you've kind of been able to downpack the stuff that really makes you thrive, the things that you need to have in order. And everyone's different as well. But I just love that but even just the boundaries part, it's very unheard of, to be honest, over this part of the world where your boss or the team actually stops texting or stops emailing at a certain hour. So I like that. So actually, out of all of this, if any listeners are like, man, I want to work in a granola shop, I'm going to have a career break. And I just want to like be able to like just make cool granola and work at a very cool place. You know where to find Chris. So
yeah, give us a visit for sure. For sure. We are definitely looking to hire, and join the team. And if you just want to smell like honey and maple, or if you want to smell like maple syrup and like nuts all the time, which is like a great way to smell for sure. And reach out to us. You can find us.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for your time. It's always fascinating for myself to learn about different industries, and I'm a massive foodie. So when you talk about like being in school and like doing cooking, like we had like I think 2 or 3 electives every year in high school, and I would take 2 food electives. Like no one does 2 food back to back, and I was like. I'm all about the food. So very excited that we got to talk about food, restaurants, dining, and just to have you on here. And I really do hope that more people in this industry think like you, and just, try and create better places, workplaces for people to thrive in. So personally, professionally. So just want to thank you for what you do. And it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much.
So for all the listeners, please don't forget to subscribe to the Mentally Healthy Workplaces Asia podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And you can also follow us on the LinkedIn page to stay up to date on upcoming guests. And please follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn. And we will have a short clip from this and also all the other episodes. So you can just, a 2-minute short clip and just kind of see what the episode's about. And please connect with us. So myself on LinkedIn and Chris, just walk into his granola shop at Everton Park. Thank you and have a fabulous day. Enjoy. Bye.